Hello, my name is Raiyon Hunter, and welcome to Sisters in the Round. Sisters in the Round is dedicated to fostering an inclusive and empowering community within the theater industry, specifically for intergenerational Black women in films. Today, I am here in the round with Nataki Garrett. And Nataki, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nataki Garrett, CEO of Ladder Leadership Services, and I'm really happy to be here on Sisters in the Round.
Yay, and we are so happy to have you. So Nataki, I met you when I was at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and you were the artistic director. And I want to start at the beginning a little bit. So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get started into theater, and how did that trajectory bring you to wanting to be a leadership consultant?
So I got started in the theater actually pretty young. I was 13 years old when I decided I didn't want to be a swimmer anymore, and a friend of mine invited me to to join the Producers Club. And the point of the Producers Club was to sell baked goods so that the cast for whatever play that they were doing could have a good cast party afterwards. You know what I mean? And I don't know, like it seemed like that's the original bite, and the rest is really literally history. So I went from that, and I started taking classes, and I was a dancer pretty much all the way through. So being in the performing arts space was not an odd thing for me. But the thing that I loved the most about the theater was the collaborative space, this idea that we're all working towards the same thing together, and that we all get to celebrate together in the outcome. Maybe it's because I was an only child. This idea of coming together around a common good was really exciting to me as a young person. And I've had a few moments over the course of my 4 decades in the theater where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And mostly because I lost connection to that aspect of it, the collaborative part of it.
Interesting. So that's how you started out in theater. When did you know you wanted to be specifically an artistic leader in the theater industry?
So if I'm honest, I really never wanted to be an artistic leader. I didn't pursue it sort of in the kind of linear way that some people do. Like, you sort of see where you have to go in order to be at the top. I was never ever in pursuit of that. My thing was, as you move out of the sort of fun, high school theater into, thinking that you might study it in college and then, onto grad school and in the professional arena, what you begin to notice are all the ways in which the theater isn't doing what it purports to do. And two things tended to happen for me at the same time. So I would be, having this experience in the theater that was considered to be a normative experience, but it would be pretty negative for, a black female-bodied human. And then at the same time, the universe would present me with an opportunity to move into leadership. And I always saw the opportunity to move into leadership as a way to make that thing that wasn't so positive shift, right? And to provide opportunities for other people to help, to make sure that they also didn't have to experience whatever that was. And so for me, leadership has almost always been centered around creating opportunities for other people, and also kind of systems change. Like, how do you shift the system so that they're positive, so that they actually work to support everybody, so that these are not barriers that are stopping other people from getting their opportunities. And I think for the bulk of my career, I saw the theater as a place for people to sort of grow and expand their thinking, and another tool in the toolbox, if you will, to help you become to deepen your empathy, to deepen your understanding of the human condition. Those are all the things that attracted me to the theater. And so what attracted me to leadership was the possibility of upholding those ideals. if I'm at the helm, then maybe, there's less sexism. If I'm at the helm, maybe there's less racism. If I'm at the helm, maybe there's more opportunity. Maybe there are more people who will have the opportunity to have their first, like if I'm at the helm. And so the helm has always been for me the platform that I could shift the status quo. I could move things around and create opportunities for other people.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is like knowing your journey and knowing that like when you entered OSF, the goal was to shift the status quo for people to feel like they are in a community and are able to do their art safely, came with a lot of blows to your own body, and you kind of stood in the gap for a lot of that. And I guess my question to you, like thinking about it, you were the first Black woman to be the artistic director of Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And I think the first person of color in general to be the artistic director of Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Is there something you wish people understood about the emotional cost of being the first or the only?
So I actually cover a few firsts because at the Denver Center, I was the first Black woman to be appointed the artistic leadership then. The first Black woman ever in the history of the PWI American theater system to become an artistic director was Deborah Wicks. And I remember when I first came across her, because somebody had said that I was the first Black woman artistic leader, because I was appointed artistic leader while I was the associate artistic director at the Denver Center Theater. And I was like, I don't think I'm the first. I mean, if I'm the first, then this industry is pretty whack. And then it turned out that I stumbled across Deborah Wicks, who was in her position for 6 months, and the theater that she was running, she ran for 6 months, and her board ended the charter, so they ended the nonprofit status of that organization while she was the artistic leader, and started a new theater company. That's how they got rid of her. And I sought her out. I couldn't find her. And so I started to really look for, I wanted to know what happened to her. I started to look for clues. And I feel like I started my leadership journey at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival with that question. Like, what happened to her? What was her experience? Why did she disappear after being the first? And because when I came on to the Denver Center, there were no women of color, no known women of color artistic leaders in the field, except for at culturally specific theaters. There were no known women of color leaders. Now, after DEI sort of opened doors and gave people their courage back to be able to say that they were maybe a person of color, it turned out the whole time there were 2 women of color artistically running organizations. And I'll let them out themselves. You can do it, sisters in the round on them if you want to. But at the time there was nobody. I was the only one out there. And when I started at the Denver Center, when it seemed clear that they were going to put me into the position of artistic leader, and I was the acting artistic director, after my boss was resigned after my first week in the position of associate artistic director. So I took on his duties within that first week of me being there. And I remember saying to myself, okay, so if you're terrible at this, everybody will know. And they will use you as an example, and you will be literally the last for 20 years. And if you do your job, then nobody will know. But they won't be able to use you as an example to stop the possibility of other Black women from taking on these positions. So I just made a decision about being the best possible artistic leader, so that they could not deny, they could never deny the impact I could make. They could never deny it.
Mhm.
And they could never use me as an example to stop, Hannah Sharif
Mhm.
from being appointed as the first appointed Black woman artistic director of a PWI regional theater.
Mhm.
So, so arguably, the first appointed Black woman is Hannah Sharif. The first ever Black woman is Deborah Wicks, and
Mhm.
I'm the first woman and person of color to run a $44 million annual budget theater organization. Um, uh, I'm the only woman to run as the artistic leader an organization of that size. And the hard thing about being the first is that, like I said, you're the beacon. But the
Mhm.
harder thing is that it's rare air, and so there's nobody out there. There's
Mhm.
nobody experiencing what you experience. Nobody knows what it's like. Um, I got lucky because Hannah was appointed maybe 7, 8 months before my appointment at OSF. And so Hannah Sharif, who is the artistic director of Arena Stage, and I could support one another. We could at least have, this sort of collaborative space where we could talk to each other about what we were going through and what it was like. And because literally nobody else understood
Mhm.
what was happening. And I think she was at St. Louis Rep at the time that I was at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. But then there's this other thing, at OSF, because it was so massive. There were like, when OSF was fully running, there were like 600 souls on board, right? And so even in that, the vastness of that, the sort of there were so many people and so many blind spots, so much responsibility, that even in that I was still, in rare air. I was the only one that was having those experiences. And then the other thing I'll say about it is, I was raised in an activist family, and so some things that I experienced very early in my time at OSF, I kind of knew was coming. you
Mhm.
know, uh, we would say, you want to mine deep and fast, and you want to have your go bag ready at the end of the row just in case they take you out. So I kind of knew that just being at OSF meant that I was the shift, right? I signaled for people a major shift in the organization, um, just because of the way that I looked, right? And because of my background, not because of my experience or my vision. And so before you even get to my vision, people were, uh, their comfort was being disrupted because of my existence,
Mhm.
right? And it's funny, on my way out, this donor who had a problem with me from the very beginning said in an email to somebody that I was privy to this email, but she said that now that that I needed to go because I was the end of my predecessor's time. So she didn't even count me as my own time, right? She
Nothing that
had
you
me
did.
connected to my white male predecessor, right? Um, which is it's so sexist and racist. You just sort of go like, oh, honey, you know,
I mean,
that's cool.
none of the money that you raised, none of the actors who felt comfortable and safe within their time at OSF because of your leadership, myself included, none of that
Yeah,
counted because you are just the end of
no,
your predecessor's time.
right. Well, and your safety was her discomfort. I think.
Mm.
So one of the things I tried to do when I was at OSF is I really wanted to shift the focus of the organization away from being an organization that is for the audience and for their comfort and experience, to being an organization that was for the artists and was for their comfort and experience. Because
Mhm.
my thing is, if you can create a container where the artists feel like you meant for them to be there, you were intentional about their experience, they can produce some of the most amazing work. Because I know artists can can produce some of the most amazing work in terrible circumstances where there's no support. So imagine if you shifted it and you were like, I'm going to make sure we have the resources. I'm going to make sure that you feel safe. I'm going to make sure you're fed. I'm going to make sure you're covered. I'm going to make sure you're housed. I'm going to make sure that the things that you're looking for in the room are there, that you have the support, that somebody's there to find out from you if you have the things that you need. I want to make sure that I'm intentional about you being here. And that, I think, was very disruptive to the status quo at an organization like OSF that had really focused primarily on its donors, really. A funny story, anecdote.
Yeah.
Middle of the pandemic, I get a call from this major donor, and they were really upset because the theaters were shuttered. And he was like, you've got to get these theaters open, right? He was like, here's an idea. And of course, because he was super rich, I think he really just believed that his idea was the best idea because he had money. He said, you open up the Elizabethan, and which is our outdoor theater, and I will bring all the people, and we'll charge $300 a ticket or $500 a ticket, whatever it takes, and my friends will come in and we'll be the audience, right? And I was like, okay, so are you going to do that every night? Is that like, are you going to have your top 1% donor friends come every single day for the course of the whole season and be the only audience there? Are they coming to see every show every night in every room? I was like, I said, because that sounds like a fundraiser, right? Instead of having your friends spend $500 for a ticket, why don't you help me raise the money that we need to stay open during the shuttering? Which he did not do, because he thought the thwarting of his idea was the denial of the validity of his mind or his thinking, his expertise in some way. Never run a theater. I was like, I can't get equity to let me open the theater to do that thing that you're asking me to do. But thank you. Plus IATSE. And also, I don't want the people who do their work at this organization to do all of that work so that they can stand in front of a room full of extremely rich people one night, but I understand how important this is to you, Yeah. So it was stuff like that, it's like you get to stand in the gap against people like him.
Yeah.
And you get to be the one that's like, I understand that you think you're super smart because you're rich, but you're not, you're not the smartest person in this moment.
It was such it was so informative to watch you deal with situations like this. We used to walk around OSF and almost everyone called you Queen Mother Nataki because you took personal time with people. You asked them about themselves. You asked them about their families. You truly cared. On top of that, you were raising millions of dollars for the theater. And then you were dealing with board members like this. And dealing with all of that at the same time while also raising your beautiful child and having your own life and your own family, I know could be no small feat. There is an interview with the Ashley News where one quote that you had that really stood out to me was, "Get out before you burn out." And there's such a large conversation about burning out in the American theater right now due to the financial crisis, the increased demand for initiatives with a lack of staff. So I guess my question to you was, in reference to OSF and honestly, just in general, what were the first signs on burnout that you encountered? And what was the catalytic moment to knowing that as a leader of any institution, you needed to leave?
So I was burned out a year before. I had raised all that money and then we'd gone into a fiscal crisis again. And so, again, this is moment in leadership where you're like, okay, I'll be the leader and then I'm going to do the right thing and get everything in place. And then we can all rest for a moment. And then that's not how it works at all. Then the next crisis shows up and you have to deal with that. And I knew I was burnt out when I was directing Confederates by Dominic Morceau, which is the show that you came in on. Um, I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't drinking enough water because of a physical threat that I had experienced. I had to have a security detail in order to move about the town. Um, I was working with a personal trainer for a while because, you know, I used to I could walk for miles, right? I used to walk all over the town. And when that physical threat of violence came, I could no longer do that because in order for me to walk around, I had to bring a detail, which was exhausting and humiliating and really scary, you know, to live through that. So the things that I had normally done to keep myself, you know, the self-care things that I'd done to keep myself sane in that work that I had to do there, um, were removed. I no longer had access to them. I couldn't go to the gym. The town decided that they didn't want my security detail outside of the gym. So they told my personal trainer, who found a private gym so that we could work out. And the point of going to the private gym was that it was private. And they told her that I could no longer work out there if I had to bring my detail because it made the space look ghetto. Now, here's two things. The first is it's super, super racist by itself. Yeah, that's what they said. They said it makes it look ghetto. But the second thing is like, who was looking? Like, who cared about my security detail, right? And so I knew that there was at that point a concerted effort from the town to get me to leave. I knew that. And they, you know, so you do it in these ways, like you remove the things that make me human, right? I remember going to the doctor's office once, and it was during COVID, and I just wanted to, like, I just needed her to fill a prescription so that I could get a prescription for an antibiotic. But her nurse decided that the best way to treat me was there was a shed in the parking lot in the front, and she wanted me to go. So she came outside with a broom and was sweeping out the cobwebs and spiders from this shed. And she was like, and then I'll see you in here, right? It was things like that, right? So after a while, you know, because you can be resilient, you know, maybe for 30 days, maybe for 60 days, maybe for 90 days. But right around like 99 days, it starts to eat at you, right? So I wasn't burnt out just because of the job. I was burnt out because the sort of humane ways in which you're supposed to be able to live, I didn't have access to in that town. I couldn't just go to a restaurant. You know, I couldn't just go to the movies. You know, I couldn't just go for a walk in the park. I couldn't enjoy the outdoors in Ashland. And this town that really never made me feel like I belonged there. I never felt like I was a neighbor there, right? It starts to wear on you, and I could feel it. So I'm working 90-hour weeks to try to get this money in, to try to, you know, I'm getting on planes as often as I can to see if I can, you know, raise money and raise awareness and resource. Coming from the pandemic, you know, I was burnt out because we had to build back an audience, and I believe that the board was convinced that if I had like one shot, if I couldn't get the audience back in that one season, that, you know, this idea that I was not good enough for the job would prevail. And so I was under a lot of pressure to prove that I was worthy of the work that I was killing myself for. And so, you know, I was already burnt out by the time I said, get out before you burn out. Right.
Yeah.
I was already burnt out. And then the last thing that they did, and I haven't really spoken about this, but I, actually now, this is years later, um, they wanted me out so bad, this town, that my landlord sent me a text saying that he was selling the house that I was renting from him, and that I had to be out in 30 days. And here's the real messed up part about that. So 30 days would have put me right in the middle of the beginning of the season. Everybody scrambled to try to find me some other kind of housing. It was revealed that none of that was true, that it was actually using housing as a way to get me out.
Hmm.
And so that's actually when I started to think about, like, what am I doing here again? Now you threaten my life, right? But if you're going to destabilize my housing, then it's, like it sort of turns that threat up even higher.
Yeah.
Because now I have all these parameters for where I can live and how I can live. And then I was at lunch with my mother and my husband and my child and my security detail.
Yeah.
And this person who lives in the town, who is a kind of a busybody, came and invited herself to the table and started asking me, if the reason why I wanted to live in that house is because it's the prettiest house on the block, and what is it like living in that house? It was an old, a historical house, Victorian, right? And she was like, "What is it like living in the house?" And I was like, I mean, you cook in the kitchen, you sleep in the bedroom, like, what do you mean? What is it like living in a house? That's when I started to see that there was this, like, effort on the part of the town to get me out of there. It's like, what are you doing bothering me about? I said, this is the first time that I'm able to be out with my family in a long time. Excuse me while I finish my lunch.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just asking, because it must be a privilege to live in a house like that. What are you talking about?
The assumption
Right?
is
And later on,
why would you
yeah,
or lived in a house like that? Couldn't be you.
yeah, it couldn't be you. And also, you should understand how privileged you are to be in it. Well,
Mm.
I'm renting a house. Like, the exchange is that I spend money every month and I get to live in this house,
Yeah.
right? That's when you rent a house, that's what happens. But that she was so brazen about it, kind of let me know. It wasn't, the environment wasn't right. So it was time to go.
Yeah. I mean, some of these things we have talked about before, and some of these things I'm hearing for the first time. And I could not imagine going through all of that while also having to, be a human being who has needs and children and a family. Uh, What so after you exited OSF, what did the healing process look like for you?
And so I'm still in it, just so
Yeah.
we're clear. I left in May of 2023. And, again, it was a really it was a rough landing, I should
Mhm.
say. Um, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. After coming down off of that, we moved to a suburb, somewhere between Sacramento and San Francisco. And, I'd never actually lived in a suburb before. I think Ashland was the most suburban I've lived, right? And it was rural. Um, but I've never had anything in between. So now I'm in this, like, chain restaurant, tract home kind of a space. It was incredibly isolating. Right before I left OSF, though, somebody sent me an email. A patron sent me an email, and she said, "I think that this would be something that would be good for you." And it was an email about applying to be a part of a retreat series for Black women leaders who are also mothers.
Mhm.
And this angel, I mean, it was like one of those moments where you're like, you know, even in this town, there's like this one angel that is doing this thing for me. So I applied and I got in. And so one of the things I can say about the healing process was I went on a few retreats. I went on those three, and I'm actually, I call it like the year of retreat.
Mm.
I went on writing retreats and rest and renewal retreats, and this 3-part series retreat for Black women leaders who are mothers. And that was a part of it. I also found a doctor who actually cared about my physical well-being, my physical and emotional well-being. One of the first things she asked me after doing a series of tests, because I hadn't done any kind of self-care in any way, right? I arrived, as the artistic leader of OSF, which meant that, I could go 6 hours without drinking water or going to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Like, that's who I was. She
Mhm.
says to me, hey, your tests are coming out like this. Here are some things I'm going to diagnose you, some clarity on some of the things that I was experiencing in my body. But I didn't have time to sort of stop to check and take care. But she said, I want to know why you're like dehydrated. Your body is so dehydrated. The numbers are like as if you had been in a famine.
Mm.
And that's one of those moments where you go, she was like, I want to know why. And I was like, well, I had this job in which I could not go to the bathroom. So I didn't drink water all day for months. So sometime at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything started to be on Zoom, I sort of locked into this inert position in front of a computer screen and stayed there, for 2.5, 3 years
Mm.
in that position, to try to save this organization. And the meetings would be scheduled in back to back to back, or I'd get it from a call and then I'd be on my phone and I'd walk around the house on that phone call, trying to solve this problem, get back into the Zoom space. And, like, so, and I felt like not being available meant that I wasn't there for my team. If I wasn't available at the time that, my calendar said I needed to be available, I just really felt like I was letting people down. So I didn't drink water. So one of the things I did was I had to teach myself how to, like, remember to drink water,
Mhm.
to remember to hydrate myself, and one thing leads to another. You hydrate, you take a water fitness class, you take a yoga restore class, you go on a walk for the first time, because when I left OSF and I left Oregon, I was still afraid to kind of be in crowds or be out by myself, even though I do know that the threat was specifically there. I mean, the person who threatened me specifically said that,
Yeah.
it was about being there, and being in that position of power there. But you just don't know. But I also feel like, I was still in fight or flight. So it took me a while to, like, take my first walk in my neighborhood, um, by myself, and then, a year later, I was like, 4 mile in it, you know what I mean? Walking as many places as possible. So you heal a little bit every day, and uh, you meditate. Like, I taught myself how to meditate, and I have this regular meditation and prayer ritual, that I do 3 times a week. And if I don't do it, I know that, some things will become imbalanced. I just had to do some things to get myself back on track and get back to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been actually a healing journey, is also a grief journey,
Mm.
right? And the grieving process is really necessary, for you to evolve, for emotional evolution. It's an opportunity for you to actually evolve. And so I feel like I really respect the grief ritual now,
Yeah.
because I had to go through that process.
As you went through the grief and the healing process and learn and relearn some new things about yourself, and your routine, did it change how you approached leadership? Did it change how you approach the leader that you wanted to be?
Yes. First of all, it taught me that I didn't want to lead. One of the things I had to go back to was, do I really want to lead in the organizational space?
Mm,
And the answer is I never really wanted to do that. I did it because the opportunity allowed me to do what I said before, which was provide opportunities. But on its own, um, and I think I'm a pretty good leader, right? But on its own, it wasn't really where my heart was. My heart was really in supporting, visionaries in helping to get back to themselves and helping to evolve their visions, not just for the organizations, but for the future they're trying to shape. That was really important to me. And that's sort of at the center of the work that I'm doing, with my company, Ladder Leadership Services. So what I do now is I coach,
yeah.
and I coach leaders to get back to themselves. I'm not like a Tony Robbins coach where I'm going to be like, here's a good formula, and if you fill out these forms, and you can get to these KPIs. That's not me. I'm more like, can you reserve in 20-second increments a little time that you give back to yourself?
Mm,
You
hmm.
know,
It's
I'm
about
more like,
not the institution that they're leading.
it's about you. I mean, at OSF, I had a remarkable team. I mean, like the best team in the business. I recruited the best team in the business. But I also feel like burnout, one way you know that you're burnt out is that team starts to look at the things that are at the antithesis of your vision
Mm,
as the way to solve the problem of the organization, right? Somehow the vision becomes the culprit, right? And that was another sign that I was burnt out when my team was like, maybe we should just do what they want. And I was like, yeah, but I didn't bring you here to do what they want. I brought you here to do what we want. I brought you here because we had this intersection on a vision. We all believe in the same thing. So when a leader reconnects with their own voice, their own intuition, their own clarity of purpose, they become more grounded, right? More discerning, and more intentional. And the purpose of the work is about being intentional. And the purpose of the work that I was doing at OSF was about being intentional.
yeah.
And that's what I like to focus on now. So as a leader of my own company, it's about me actually doing that work too, of me being more intentional about the work that I'm doing.
Yes. I absolutely love that. A question for you. I mean, as your responsibilities grew as a leader, did it change your relationship to your artistry at all? Because we started talking a little bit about how you've always been an artist and how art has always been a part of your life. And I'm curious about if once those responsibilities started to grow and money and politics and all of the things entered the chat, did that change your relationship to your artistry at all?
Yes, it did. But I think, how do I answer that question? So artistically, my artistic space has always been pretty sacred to me,
Hmm.
because I'm not even supposed to be a working director. You know what I mean? Um, I remember in grad school, I was so clear. I was like, if I don't make it, the theater world won't care. Like a tree fell someplace, nobody heard it. You know what I mean? So I have to be really deeply responsible for that process. right? And to not allow anything to penetrate that space. And so one thing, being an artistic leader, one thing that it taught me is that I didn't want to be a producer of my own work. I actually wanted to create a space in which I could just be an artist while I was creating, right? And that's part of the sort of premise of Artists at the Center, right? It was like, if I could carve out just this space,
Yeah.
just the hours of rehearsal, so that my phone isn't on the table, I'm not worried that the next person who comes into the room is asking me to leave my rehearsal to go to a meeting. And so just recently, because that's still a part of it, right? And I'm directing a lot less. In fact, I turn down more gigs that I take. I'm very discerning about where I'm doing my art. One of the things I'm checking for is if there's an intentionality about, artists and artistic practice at the place that is asking me to come to do my art with them. But more importantly, I'll say out loud to a producer, just so we're clear, I'm a very good producer and I'm not going to produce this with you. So, and what that means for me is that a lot of times when a producer doesn't have the capacity to understand what it means to be intentional, what they'll do is set up the situation so that as things start to fall apart, because they weren't intentional about the resources, or they weren't just intentional about the personnel, or they weren't intentional about, even what the play called for.
Yeah.
What they do is they rely on the artist to start to either carve down the vision to fit into what they actually have enough resource for, or to fight like a banshee to get those things in their midst. Like, you become the squeaky wheel, yelling and screaming about like, when are the costumes going to be here, right? And my thing is like, you are producing this, and so you're going to do what it takes to make it happen, and I'm not going to worry about it. Oh, we don't have props for this scene? Okay. When the actor asks me, when are we getting the props? I'll say, maybe the stage manager can get the producer in here to talk about that with you. Because they said they wanted to do this play and they hired you and me. But what I can do is you and I, can work as two artists in this room on how we're going to tell the story of the circumstance in this scene, whether that prop comes or not. How about that? Let's do that. Let's focus on that. And I'm going to let everybody else scramble to get that prop in here. And so what leadership taught me is how to protect my process, how to be clear about where the boundaries are around my process, and how to give a shit about the things that I give a shit about, and to not give a shit about the things that are not in my purview, and to let that go.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm listening to you and I'm also like receiving, because it's something that I also need to hear. I mean, one of the things that we talked about, a little bit ago, was that I had this, I guess, this thought, or I just assumed that, with being a Black woman leader, that all of these blows will happen and I will always have to take them, that like they will, it'll build that muscle, and, it'll teach me how to deal with the situation for the next time, because I know I'm going to have to deal with it. And to hear you kind of talk about like your journey in leadership and getting to this place that, I feel like this is my first time hearing anyone being like, no, I'm going to take not first time, but, you don't hear it often from Black women leaders specifically, to say like, I am actually choosing myself. I am actually letting you know that this is not my responsibility, and that I will not save the world in this specific instance, because that's your job. It is refreshing to hear and to know that this is a point or a state that you can get to, and it is possible. When you
And it will save your soul, it really will. It will save you.
Yes. when you think of the next generation of Black women leaders, what do you want them to inherit, and what are some things that you hope they get to experience?
Well, funny, I was talking to the other day, I interviewed my previous coach,
Mm-hmm.
Lynette Turner, and we were talking about this opportunity, this idea of opportunity. So sometimes when negative things happen, it's not a matter of perception. You know, sometimes when negative things happen, at some point you actually have to look at those negative things as an opportunity,
Mm.
right? Until, and she said that's what she held on to until, you know, she started to witness that what she was telling people is that these are opportunities. So every single time something bad happened, you'd be like, well, what is the opportunity? And she started to say, you know, you can create your own opportunities. And so they don't always have to come out of these moments of harm. I maintain that resilience requires harm, and so I have to question whether or not being resilient in XYZ way is the best course of action for a Black woman leader or a
Mm.
Black femme leader. I don't know if it's the most positive thing um, to become more and more and more resilient, because you actually have to go through harm to get there.
Yeah.
Um, and so my hope is that you're not placed in a position to have my experience over and over again. The next generation, um, if I could say that any part of what I experienced while I was in Ashland was worth it. The one thing that would let me know it was worth it is if no woman of color ever had to experience any of the things that I experienced there again. Um, and how do you get to a place where you don't have to experience that? You have to move with your boundaries clear and your intention clear. You have to know what it is you're there for, and you have to understand the places that you're moving into. You know, months later, you know, 2 years later, you start to go, oh yeah, well, uh, OSF is an organization. Ashland is a place, and they're organically moving in the world in their own way, right? Like, so those places are doing what they do, right? I can self-select in and try to get as much done as I can, and I can also self-select out and decide that that's somebody else's, right? Um, and that's liberating to be like, I don't have to do that, you know. And that's what I want another generation of Black femme leaders to experience, is that you don't have to do that. You know, you don't have to have those experiences. It should not be a given that you'll be harmed. One last thing I'll say about that anecdotally, because I like to speak in anecdotes. I had somebody say to me, I was telling them about some next level professional violence I was experiencing. This is while I was still in Ashland. And they were like, well, that's, you know, you know, that's normal, you know, that's what leaders experience. This is a man mansplaining to me, you know, that leaders experience harm. And I was like, you know, thank you for telling me that, because I know everything about how you lead, you know, like the world that you create, right? This is not normative for me. So I'll just say, as a leader, for me, I do not want to make it normal that harm is a part of it, because if you measure status quo harm is um, usually harm that is that a white male leader can take, but not necessarily kind of harm that you and I can take.
Yeah. I thank you so much for that. I have two more questions for you. The first question is, what gives you hope right now, and what brings you joy?
What gives me hope right now? So one of the most positive things about coaching is that you're working with people on a daily basis who are seeking a way forward. And so being in the space with people who are trying to center their vision and imagine a pathway forward is hope in a bottle. Like it is literally a daily dose of hope. People who are still endeavoring towards the thing, still trying to make change, still trying to produce the perfect show, still trying to impact people's lives in positive ways. It reminds you that we might be in an authoritarian, regime or building towards that. Things might be really tough. There are people who are really suffering, and there are people who are working to end that suffering at the same exact time. And that gives me hope.
Now it brings
Can
you
you hear now my background noise?
No.
Okay, that's great.
What brings you joy?
My kid.
Yay.
My 5-year-old little wonder, my eighth wonder of the world. I am so privileged to be mommy to this brilliant little 5-year-old old soul, who imparts so much wisdom and moves with so much clarity and has so much self-actualization and self-realization. I learned so much from her daily, and I'm so blessed to be her mommy.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Okay. My last question to you, I thought was easy, but has proven to kind of be hard for people. If you had to choose 5 songs that represented your journey in life all the way up until now, what would those 5 songs be?
Oh, I never remember the words to songs. I mean, the titles of songs, but
A little bit,
the first song that jumped into my head was you can't break my soul. What is that? You can't. What is
Break
that?
My Soul by Beyonce.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might be at the top. I am sorry, I'm gonna cheat and actually look at a playlist because I have to name it this way, if you don't mind.
I do not mind at all. It's also not cheating.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad that you don't consider that to be cheating.
It's either you look at it or you say the title of a song and then everyone has to guess it because Black women
I
love
know, and then you spend like 20 minutes going like, what is the name of the song? Let's see. Where is this playlist? Now I can't find it.
No worries.
Oh, here it is. Oh, okay. Okay.
All right.
Find Your Tribe by Jim and Elle.
Okay.
Build Me Up by Cleo Soul.
Okay.
Window Seat by Erykah Badu.
Okay.
And Optimistic by Sounds. Window Seat?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why window seat? Yeah. Well, I don't know, because I'm an early adapter. Like I understood what Erykah Badu was trying to do, like back in the super high gala days. I knew that she was changing. She was changing the soul of soul, right? You know what I mean? But window seat, the tune, the way the song unfolds, this idea of solitude, of being able to sit next to yourself in a space and own your own point of view. I don't want nobody next to me. I want to be able to look at the world from my own eyes and my point of view. and own that for myself, that's what I want. And so that's why that. And then the last one is Optimistic by Sounds of Blackness, which is an old, old but always, like,
Old
as
but good.
long as you keep your head to the sky, be optimistic. So that's 5. Yes.
Oh, I love those. I love those. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, for your time. And also thank you for being so generous with what you
Yes.
are offering us here. It is so appreciated. Thank you for being in the round with us. Thank you all for listening. And please check out Ladder Leadership Services. And we hope you guys join us soon. Bye-bye.